You've heard it before, I know that you have. Someone saying, my art, my style is too dangerous. Too dangerous for the ring, too dangerous for the cage. It's just deadly, too deadly. Well, I'm here to say maybe that's true. Hey, what's up? I'm Ken, this is kenfuTV, and each week I release videos in the martial arts, philosophy, technique, training, that sort of thing. And today we're going to talk about when an art or style is too dangerous. So when do you hear it? When do you typically hear somebody saying that their art or their style is too dangerous? Well, I think there are two primary places that happens, and I want to get to those here in a minute. But first I want to start with something I remember from when I first started karate. There was a student who was training who looked at my instructor and he said, "Why don't you ever see this style?" It was Seo Shorin-ryu at the time. "Why don't you ever see this style in the UFC?" And my instructor looked to him and he said, "Because there are rules." There's a lot of truth in that statement, but you could also be led astray quite easily as well. I'll save my thoughts on that in the end. There's other things that I want to talk about first. So jumping back to the two reasons that I think you typically hear somebody saying that their art or their style is too dangerous. The first being because they focus specifically on techniques or things that are specifically dangerous, deadly. They spend all of their time focusing on parts of the art that are designed to seriously hurt somebody or kill someone. And there are arts out there that do that. They don't have any interest in the combat sports, the arena, any of that. That area is not of interest to them. In a self-defense scenario, you're still accountable to the law, and so how you handle that and where you stop is really important based on the legal requirements of your area. Otherwise, you could survive the encounter and still be in jail for a significant portion of your life. There's a book called Violence of Mind by Varg Freeborn that I think everyone should read if they're really interested in the self-defense perspective. And then, if I'm honest, there's a whole laundry list of books after that that are worth reading as well. Well, there are rules in the cage, and too dangerous, i.e., these are not allowed, is a real thing. If me grabbing and squeezing your throat is something that's too dangerous, something that's not allowed by the rules, because it's too dangerous, I mean, well, that's true. You can't argue that. And you say, well, try to grab my throat or something like that. Well, you look at these guys grapple. If they wanted to grab somebody's throat, they don't even have to be taught how. They could just do it. It's not a matter of whether or not these people just don't know how to do it. They do. They have no problems knowing how to eye gouge or fish hook or throat grab or any of this stuff. I'm not worried about any of the guys that I see in the cage being able to do that. They all can. They're choosing to follow the rules. The second one, and the one that probably makes this particular comment come up more frequently, and the one that maybe bothers us the most when we hear it, is when you know that it's coming from a place where things haven't been pressure tested. It's a way to dissuade people from arguing with your point of view. It usually comes from an instructor who believes very strongly in the things that they've been taught, but also maybe doesn't have the ability to back it up or feel confident about being able to do it. And in some ways that leads to people believing things about their art because they've been told to, in theory, and not because of something that's true that they've seen or experienced taking place. Yeah, there are dangerous techniques. And, if I'm honest, all of the information about the dangerous techniques exists in the world. You can go look at it any time. Most of the way that I approach understanding how to do something well, become more efficient, or understand why something would work, doesn't come from the martial arts. It comes from studying the human body and how the body works, right? It doesn't take a, I want to say a rocket scientist, but that's a weird analogy, but it doesn't take someone incredibly intelligent to realize that an arm bends this way until this point, and that bending it past that point will cause it to break. That's the way a hinge joint works, right? You got ball and socket joints, you got hinge joints, you got different things that we've known about since high school, elementary school. Like, we've known about these things. And knowing the way something should go and that it's bad when it goes beyond that is everything you need to know. So if you can figure out a way to do something beyond what should happen to keep someone safe, to keep someone uninjured, then you know how to hurt somebody. You know how to do something dangerous. So it's not a secret. And a lot of times people who say these things come at it from a perspective of it being a secret. We keep it a secret. Our art is too dangerous. We vet you so well. and then we only teach these things after you've spent years and years with us, improving yourself and all of this. This mysticism, this romantic idea, is something incredibly prevalent in the martial arts. And I've been there. I mean, I watched the same movies. I grew up watching the same things. The idea of being in an art where you are given something special, something precious that someone else doesn't have, and it's so deadly that it makes you better or greater or more capable than anyone else. Yeah, who doesn't want that? Especially for us young men. The idea of getting into the martial arts typically starts from there, because that idea makes you feel powerful, makes you feel like you could be confident in yourself, that this would change your deal. And there are plenty of movies and TV shows and Karate Kids and Cobra Kais and all of these things that lead you to a place where you see someone who maybe was that age, that awkward teenager who studies martial arts and becomes confident in themselves and wins the girl and beats up the bully and does all the things that make them feel like their life has been fulfilled. The problem I have is I believe there are people who capitalize on that idea and they perpetuate this falsehood that there is content, there is technique and things that is just too deadly. I can't show you why I could stop you from doing a double leg takedown. This is a good example. This is an example that I have in my life of a place that I'm sharing with you, of a place that I was wrong. I was just wrong. I trained stand-up martial arts. We didn't do any grappling. We didn't do any ground stuff. We threw people to the ground. We did that, but we didn't fight from the ground. So when I started seeing jiu-jitsu becoming more prevalent, and I started seeing more people managing this, and I had people in my life who were like, yeah, like double leg takedown or something. And I remember specifically, I had a friend who was very into the UFC. Jiu-jitsu was definitely on his mind. He had a military background. The Marine Corps combatives also included some groundwork, that kind of stuff. And I remember him shooting for a double leg, and I went down. And I went down because, in my mind, my answer was simple. I just raise my knee, I slam you in the head so hard that I put you out. Like, good luck putting me on the ground. That was what I believed. And then, lo and behold, and it didn't happen this way in this thing. I honestly froze. I went, well, this is a friend of mine. I don't want to just slam my knee into his head. And that gets so frustrating because you feel like, well, yeah, you're making me look like an idiot because you're putting me in a place where I would have to seriously hurt you in order for me to be successful. Well, the truth is now, fast forward to studying grappling, coming to understand grappling and that sort of thing, and the idea of raising my knee to hit somebody, well, one, it's expected. People anticipate that you might try to do that. And two, everybody has a much better chance of putting you on the ground when you're standing on one leg than when you're standing on two. So the second that knee comes up, it gets worse for you, not worse for them. So that's an example in my life where my lack of knowledge made me feel confidently that I had the solution. If I was in a situation where I didn't feel for the person that I needed to do it to, that I could have successfully pulled it off and it would have been fine. I'd just slam you in the head, then do whatever comes next. Probably something else percussive. My art is too dangerous. I'll just do this. I would just do this. I would just. That's the problem. I would just, not I have done this. I have tested this. I have worked through scenarios that allow me to understand how this works. And I have pressure tested and done this live in a way that helps me know what does work about it, what doesn't work about it, and when it works and when it doesn't work. Instead, I just know, well, if you do this to someone, it's really bad. So just do that. Well, just do that, and knowing how and when to be able to pull it off are drastically different things. Probably going to make a separate video at some point about just the idea of hiding behind knowledge from a place, a position of power. When you're an instructor, people come to you to learn from you. They come to you and they develop trust with you. And a lot of times, if you tell them something, they believe it because why wouldn't they believe it? They came to you for the answers, and if you gave them the answer and it seems reasonable, why wouldn't you believe that? Well, the problem is you are responsible for that. Responsible for that. When it comes to this, we're talking about art being too dangerous. That's one way that people hide behind their lack of experience or lack of confidence in something. The other way, and the confidence thing becomes more relative, is just diving into details, and I can talk more about that in that video. Diving into details and just kind of stopping the buck stops here type conversation are good ways to keep you in a position of ignorance and making other people equally ignorant, but they have no reason to believe anything else. At least you have the idea that I know that I might be wrong, but I don't want you to know that about me. But what you've done instead is you have told them to believe that they have the answer, and they don't actually know that they might be wrong. They just believe that that's right, which means that they continue confidently into something dangerous, which brings me to what I wanted to talk about next. Teaching an art poorly can be dangerous. It can make your style or your art dangerous if the way that you teach is something that leaves people not knowing what they need to know, but believing that they have all the answers. Well, then, yeah, your style is dangerous. Incredibly dangerous. You are gearing people up for the potential to go out and need to defend themselves in some sort of way, need to utilize the skills and knowledge that they've got now, only it fails them because they were left lacking due to the lack of good instruction. So, number one place that I find an art being dangerous is when the person teaching it doesn't have a full context, but masquerades it as though they do have the full context and they do have all the answers, and they brush off any questions, or possibly you're not even allowed to ask questions, so that they're never having to explain to you why what they're saying might not actually be true. Especially when you see the gun disarms, knife disarms, there's things about them that are just terrifying if you know what any amount of that actually looks like, how those things work. There are, in my opinion, very few good gun disarms and very many awful disarms. And it turns out that most people's instinct to just kind of step back and pull the trigger corrects the line and puts a bullet in you every time. And it's not difficult to see how that would work. And so if you don't understand that, you could learn disarms and things that put you in a place where you think that that's the right choice to make. I'll just take your gun away and help you shoot me in the face, and then it's over for me. This is dangerous. So any style, any instructors, any lineage of instructors, because if it's been going on for a while, there might be many instructors that all believe the same things, the same falsehoods, who continue to perpetuate bad knowledge, even when they maybe start to understand that it's bad knowledge, but there's the sunk cost. We've been doing it this way for so long, so we continue to do it this way anyway. Just stick with it. We don't want to rock the boat. Is dangerous. Then your style is dangerous. Next up is just generally the concept of context. Anybody who's training you for something, while you expect that you're learning something else, is teaching you a dangerous thing. So if you come to me to learn a sport context thing, and I teach you something very violent that's not for the sport, that's not good for you. Could get you hurt, could have you hurting other people, could certainly not help your career if you're going for a professional thing and you just keep getting kicked out or disqualified because you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing. When it comes to combat sports have rules for a reason. They establish what is or is not a success. If you don't understand those rules, then you're not going to be very good. When someone says my art is too dangerous for the UFC or too dangerous for the cage or the ring, usually what they mean is my art is not appropriate for those places. The parts of my art that I study and want to spend time and focus on are not appropriate for that situation. I guarantee, hands down, everybody who makes it all the way to the UFC, who has gone through all of their early fights and they've made it through preliminaries and they've made it all the way into a pay-per-view broadcasted fight, I guarantee every single one of those dudes could kill you. Every man or woman who gets in that cage who's able to fight at that level has the ability, has the power and the structure and the knowledge to be able to wreck you really easily. But what people sometimes fail to realize is that it's not just that, it's the fact that they can do all the things you could do too. They probably know how to choke you, break your neck, break your arms, do these things, gouge your eyes, bite you, do all of that stuff. They know all of that. They're only not doing it because that gets them disqualified, and then they're booted. They don't get to take home the purse. They don't get to get their next fight. They don't get any of that stuff. So they don't do it. That doesn't mean they can't. That doesn't mean that what you have is better than what they have. It just means that that's not something they're expressing right now because it's not the appropriate place to do so. I feel no differently about this than I do when it comes to self-defense. People that come in and teach you, here's how you handle hitting somebody, hurting somebody, breaking somebody in order to defend your life, but they never talk about the legal ramifications, the mental and psychological components that go along with it, the chemical cocktail that enters your body, and the way the body reacts to those things when you're in those circumstances, any of those things, and many more. When those are not included in your self-defense curriculum, then you're just preparing someone to have skills that they rely on overconfidently, false confidently, only to not have any preparation for what that's actually like when the time comes, and they're unable to do it, or they try it and it makes things worse. Not to mention, when it comes to self-defense, the way that it's taught in most martial arts is a stranger who decides that they want to mug you, rape you, kill you. And honestly, the mug, rape, kill is not the part that I'm focused on. It's the stranger part. Stranger, the idea of these kinds of violent things happening from a stranger is so less frequent than it being somebody that you know, somebody that you've encountered. It might not be somebody that you're close to. It might. Especially in the case of sexual violence, it very, very often is somebody that you are close to and know well. But there are also people who groom you, people who scout you, and they come to know you. They prey on you, right? There are predators who they know who they're targeting. But there's also different types of violence. There is resource violence, there is predatory violence, and they're handled differently, and the way you handle them, it needs to be different as well, because something that you might do to de-escalate one might escalate another, so you need to know that. So if you're in a place that is teaching self-defense and not recognizing those components, then yes, your art, your style is dangerous, but not for the other person. It's dangerous for the person you're teaching. You're putting them in a place where they could get hurt, injured, killed, etc., all because they were not prepared. But it's not about not being prepared, but they didn't know that they weren't prepared. They didn't know that they were bad off. They believed that they were safe, that the skills that they had would save them, when they might not, or probably won't. If that's the way your art or your style works, then yes, your art or your style is too dangerous for the wrong person. Lastly, I want to talk about just the fact that every art is dangerous. All of them. Every single one. We are simultaneously incredibly durable and incredibly fragile. There are many things that people didn't expect to happen that do. I could decide to defend myself by just shoving you off of me. And you could trip, you could hit your head, and you could die. Just that easy. And I'm not saying that everybody that falls and everybody that hits their head dies, but that might be all it takes. Purely accidental. Depending on the legal recourse, I might have a lot of ramifications from that. I might have a lot of costs defending myself and having to make sure that what happened doesn't land me in jail or prison for the rest of my life or some sort of duration. I also have to live with the mental components of what happened and the fact that I killed somebody. I just wanted that guy to back up, just get off of me, and now he's dead. And I might not be mentally prepared to handle having taken someone's life, even if it was an accident. There's still coping and therapy that's probably going to be necessary for me to manage that. Anything. I mean, just the fact that we can fall, and I capitalize on this one a lot because it's the brain is a delicate thing, and so this one just seems to be the one that messes people up the most, which is anytime you punch, kick, shove, throw, etc., and someone could hit their head. That might be it. Might be done. Right? I might decide. This is why the struggle, right? When you were, at least when I was growing up, the idea of somebody standing up to a bully and you just got to hit him one good time, and that settles the thing. And yeah, I mean, it maybe does. It shows that you're not going to back down. But there's also the danger that somebody could get seriously hurt really easily. Any art that has anything, it's not even percussive, it's not even grappling, it's not even whatever, it's any art that interacts and has you physically interact with another human has the potential to drastically hurt that other human. I feel strongly and say often that Martial arts learns violence in order to better understand how to not perform violence. The best way to make sure that you know when to stop or how to control something, or you can see ahead into the ramifications of how something might unfold and make steps to change what's happening to address that, does not come from lack of knowledge. It comes from extreme knowledge. If I know how to break your neck, then I can understand what it would take to not break your neck. If I know how to break your arm, then I can understand what it takes to not break your arm. If I know how to choke you until you're unconscious or dead, then I know when the line is to stop those things. If I don't have an understanding of that, then that means that I could do too much. When we teach martial arts, the goal should be to understand violence, to understand the fragility of humans, and to have the ability to control how far something goes. Any art can do something that goes too far. Every art is dangerous. Every art can be too dangerous or can be not dangerous enough, which is its own kind of danger. When these things are not expressed and not understood, that's when something is too dangerous. By now you should be having a strong idea of maybe my feelings of that statement from the beginning of the episode where I mentioned my instructor saying, because the UFC has rules, our style is not seen there. A lot of what I said kind of really wraps that up, which is, yeah, the things that we do that are inappropriate for the ring aren't seen in the ring because they're inappropriate for the ring. You don't see our style. This is maybe one that's not as obvious. You don't see our style in the UFC because what you probably see is every style in the UFC. If somebody does karate in the UFC, the parts that they do that are appropriate and make sense for the ring, the punching, certain types of guards, the kicking, throwing, that kind of stuff, most of them do it. When I see that type of application, if you strip away the other parts of it and you just go to those things, the fundamentals of the art that work really well in the cage, then what you see is any karate, not any particular style. You see any karate. And then if the more you understand other styles, well, is it karate? Is it taekwondo? Is it taekwondo? Is it hapkido? Is it hapkido? Is it aikido? Is it... When you get into some of these things that boil down to what works, how do you tell the difference? I don't see our style in there. No, because nothing stylistically unique about what we do is expressed. That doesn't mean that, hell, for all I know, there's people out there who have trained in what we do that made it to the UFC. I don't think so, because from my understanding of Seoshore and Ryu, for example, and the people that I've met, most of them don't really have an interest. They're more into the do ethos, the character building and the self-defense. They're not specifically interested in combat sports, and so naturally they wouldn't end up there. But that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. That doesn't mean that doesn't happen all the time, that you have somebody with a style that you would not think would go well in the ring, go in the ring anyway, because there are parts of it that absolutely work in the ring, and usually people have training in more than one thing if they're going to go to something like the UFC. A mixed martial art type combat sport is where you see that combination. Obviously, there are combat sports that are unique. Boxing is a combat sport that is boxing. You're not going to bring in your Muay Thai and your grappling because it doesn't fit the rule set. So all of these different things really just determine, the rule sets determine what makes sense. And when you leave everything else out, of course you don't see the things that maybe feel uniquely to your style. The things that remain are things that maybe you just wouldn't even notice that they were different. I was working with somebody who trained 5 years Muay Thai. I have not trained 0 Muay Thai. We just got to kind of talking, and threw some kicks. He said, yeah, that's exactly how we throw that kick. As far as I knew, that was just the way that I threw my kicks in karate, but the way that I threw them, the way that I have learned to throw them, the way I have adapted throwing them because of the way the human body moves, he went, you're already doing exactly what I would have you do in Muay Thai. So how would you tell the difference? If we both throw the kick the same way, how would you know it's Muay Thai versus karate versus savat versus something else? But if I throw my kick from karate the way you throw your kick from Muay Thai, which one am I doing? How do you know? How do you know what is or is not? When somebody says, why don't you see this in there? How do you know that you don't see it in there all the time? But when somebody says my art is too dangerous, all they really mean is that some of the parts of my art, out of context, are inappropriate for the cage, for the ring. There are no secrets. This day, when you can YouTube anything, there are books written and not being threat of having them burned and destroyed for whatever political or historical reason. You have knowledge everywhere, so everything is known. We have more medical knowledge freely available than ever before, so the idea of parts of the body that can hurt or maim or kill or etc., we can know that. And we can modify technique to do it. We can look at footage of violent encounters. We can look at footage of accidents and things that have gone wrong. We can look at anything and know more. So none of this, my stuff is too dangerous, is actually because it's a secret. Because it's not. I implore you to do two things. Don't take your art so seriously that you feel that nothing compares to it. Because things do, and it's okay that they do. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're too short-sighted to see what other arts do in comparison to yours and realize that they're both valid and good, then you're taking it too serious, and you're going to put yourself in a place of overconfidence. Secondly, don't believe for a second just because you don't see somebody do something that they don't know how to do something or that they couldn't do something. When you look at the cage, you look at the ring, and you see people and you go, well, I would just do this because of my art. Take it from me, having looked at my stuff and gone through all of the years and the growth that you do as a martial artist, where you feel confident and your style becomes better than everybody else's style because you just believe that, and then over time you get exposed to more and come to a deeper understanding. When you look at that stuff and you feel, well, I would just do this, or he should have just done that, the whole armchair quarterback telling you how you should have handled that situation. Just because they didn't doesn't mean they don't know how. Doesn't mean they weren't trained for it. And yeah, we all make mistakes. We're working off of the context we have. We're working off of what's happening in those split-second moments. And those guys in the cage, they make mistakes too. There was something that could have been better, but they didn't do it because it triggered a different habit. That's not knowing how to do something. That's not having trained the habit right. Right? It's right is the wrong word. It's training. You do what you do most, and maybe you come to find out that the thing that you were doing is not as efficient or as good as something else that you do, but you've done one more than the other, so that's the one that you did. These things happen all the time, and that's why I don't sweat when people say for UFCs and things, should have done this, should have done that, should have not done this, should have not done that. They're just people. They're just trained in what they're trained in, and honestly, if they're pro, the time that it takes to become pro typically means that the investment of hours and time likely leads to them having way more knowledge of technique and application than you give them credit for, because they're just not using all of it. They're using what is effective in that rule set. So don't take your art so seriously, and don't think for a second that just because somebody's not doing something that they don't know how to do that thing just as well as you. That's it for today. That's my feelings on why I think that arts can be, styles can be too dangerous. But I still hate hearing that phrase because I think it's not used well. It's used inappropriately all the time. If you like videos like this, then I hope you stick around because I release videos like this every week. If you like videos like this, then I hope that you subscribe because I release videos like this every week. At the end of the video, I will leave a playlist of all of these so you can go watch any that you like, as well as a playlist of the stuff that I teach in the Dojo Session series with just me on the mat, teaching and training and doing drills and technique and that kind of stuff the way that I do it, if you have an interest in that. I'm Ken, this is kenfuTV, and I'll catch you in the next one.